Yeah.
Why don't you can sit to the left or right, wherever you'd like.
Sir, you sit this.
Go to the left or right, wherever you'd like.
Make yourselves comfortable.
Attorney Glenn, good morning, good to see you again. I'm all set, Sharon. I'm good.
I know, I did ask a number of the councilors.
Sharon, I'm okay, that's okay.
How do you say?
Sharon, you should have said this. I've never had a cup of coffee
You
in my life.
told me that. You haven't? I invited him for coffee one day, he said I've never had coffee.
No, just saying.
Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Iannella. I will chair the hearing. I'd like to introduce the other members of the council who are here. To my right, Councilor Marilyn Petito Devaney. Councilor Robert Trudenfeld, and left Councilor Eileen Duff. Other councilors are speaking with constituents. I had some meetings in the State House. As they come in, I will introduce them. Good morning, good afternoon, Mr. Peterson.
Good afternoon, Councilor Iannella.
At this point, I'd like to read a letter dated March 29th addressed to the councilors. I'm pleased to nominate the following person to the position of Associate Justice of the District Court, Circuit. The nominee is Scott Peterson of Hingham, Massachusetts. Sincerely, Charles Baker, Governor. I know you have a lot of distinguished guests here, so we're going to hear from them, and then we'll hear from you. Right. Before we hear from your first witness, I'd like to introduce Councilor Mary Porter.
Good afternoon.
And first we'll hear from Frederick Gilgun. You can stand up right there.
Right here?
Yeah.
Councilman, I know members of the Governor's Council, my name is Frederick Gilgun. I reside in Winchester. I'm an attorney in practice for 30 years. The last 25 years at the law firm of Nicholson, Schrader, and Gilgun. The focus of my practice has been primarily in litigation. I thank you for the opportunity to be here in support of one of my best friends, Scott Peterson's nomination for appointment of the position as Associate Justice in the District Court. Scott and I first became friends in 1979 when we enrolled at Boston College as freshmen. I had the good fortune of living with Scott for 2 years as a roommate. After we graduated law school, we again moved again in his house in Hingham. I've had a lot of first-hand experience with Scott as a friend and watching how he lives his life. It was an honor for me to serve at Scott's wedding to his bride Allison as the best man. I know Scott's family, his parents, his sisters, his son Graham very well as many of his friends. Scott's application and the other testimony you'll hear from the witnesses and supporters will speak to Scott's accomplishments as a litigator, his diverse experience in many areas of the law that I believe will make him highly qualified to serve as a justice in the district court. What I'd like to speak to is some of the other qualities that Scott possesses that I think will make him very well suited to serve as a district court judge. First among those qualities are his integrity and strength of character. These are the foundation of who Scott is as a person. Scott's integrity is beyond reproach. Throughout our friendship, I've witnessed Scott's determination to always follow the honest path and to arrive at the just result. On many occasions over the years, we've had the opportunity to have discussions, whether it be law-related or not, that involve issues including moral and ethical decisions. And I've always been impressed with Scott as he's consistently expressed opinions, made decisions, and acted in accordance with such a strong moral compass. Scott possesses these attributes, that he possesses these attributes is no surprise given his parents and the wonderful example they set. Based on my observation, Scott's integrity and character are also greatly shaped by his profound faith, which he practices regularly and serves as a guide to him in his way of life. It's because of his integrity, strength of character, and faith that he's the godfather to my only daughter, Faith. In addition, my opinion is based upon observation of Scott's temperament. Scott possesses a perfect balance of self-confidence and humility. In resolving issues, Scott's both measured and decisive. He's patient and considerate of other people's views, and yet he has ease in being efficient and decisive. It's my opinion that Scott's natural intelligence in understanding the law will lead to consistent, well-considered decisions, and when coupled with his temperament, will naturally engender respect from litigants and the public, and will allow him to control the courtroom without the need to exercise judicial muscle. Given the demands of district court today, it's imperative, in my view, that the district court judge have a strong work ethic. This comes to Scott naturally. In fact, if it's scientifically possible, I believe that he inherited this from his parents. Both his parents in their late 70s have worked hard all their lives. This day, his father, who's approaching 79 years old, continues to lay floors on his hands and knees while recently fighting off cancer. His mother continues to work 3 days a week in a doctor's office, and they do this not because they have to, because that's who they are. So I observed Scott while we were in college. While maintaining excellent grades, he worked. He worked in the ticket office at BC. He worked in the liquor store. He always found time to help his father on projects over the weekends laying floors. And all the while, he was the manager of the ski team. Scott wasn't one to sit still, and nor is he today. I observed him when I lived with him that one year at his house in Hingham, when he was renovating an old house, and he'd come home from work, and he'd pick up the hammer and saw, and he'd hang a door, lay a floor, paint, install trimming, everything. This is what he did. He never stopped. And I've witnessed it in his life as a family man. And he's running a successful law practice. He's always found time to participate in Graham's activities. He's always found time to maintain his physical fitness by running road races. He's always found time to serve on many associations and organizations, both civic and legal. And in those associations, he always rose to the level of a leader. He did that because he's industrious and because he cares. Should you support Scott's nomination, I'm confident that the litigants and the public will be appreciative when Scott is on the bench each morning at 9 o'clock ready to work. I'd like to conclude my testimony by offering the following perspective on the importance of a district court judge that was shared with me by my father, who worked for 45 years in district court, 17 years as a district court judge. In his view, public confidence in the judicial system is critical to the effective administration of justice. The district court judge is central to the public's confidence, for it's through the lens of the district court that the vast majority of the public view our judicial system, and no person is more important to framing that view than the district court judge. I can honestly say that I can think of no person more qualified to sit as a district court judge to inspire confidence in our judicial system than my friend Scott Peterson. I humbly ask you to support his nomination, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councilor Kennedy.
I just want to say I spent quite a bit of time in front of your father when he was a sitting judge. He was a great judge, he was a great man. He was up to all confident in I enjoyed it. It taught me a lot. I was a young lawyer. Very good man.
I can assure you, Councilman, that my father was wholeheartedly endorse Scott Peterson's nomination. He knows what. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from James Ely.
very much. Good afternoon, councilors. I deeply respect your role and your job and your task is here today. I had the fortune of working with my brother on a campaign for the Governor's Council a number of years ago. And I understand how important it is that you take a look at these candidates and make sure the Commonwealth is getting people who truly deservedly serve. I am so pleased to be here. I've known Scott literally since the day he was finishing up law school at Suffolk. He started with us as a paralegal, and eventually we hired him as a lawyer, and I worked with him for 20 years at a practice that was in Boston, and then in Wellesley, Healy, and Healy. Scott was also a principal with our firm for 10 years. So I do believe I can give some unique appreciation and testimony concerning his legal skills having observed them so many years. Scott is, to the point, an incredibly gifted, fantastic, and wonderful lawyer. He worked in the field of insurance defense for the most part during the 20 years he was with us. Scott was so good at what he was doing, we actually had him branch out into doing all of our appeals work. He did all of our coverage opinion work. In fact, when we had the criminal case that came in the door, Scott and my brother Tom were the two people who would work on those matters. I think that shows the breadth of his experience, the breadth of his knowledge in all types of legal affairs. The fact that he was able to have a couple of opinions published through the appeals court shows that his legal reasoning is sound and is respected by our justices. As I look back a little bit and try to reflect on why I think Scott would be a great judge, I kind of think in my own mind what I would be looking for. And I had the fortune of serving on the Judicial Nominating Council under Governor Swift. And it was clear to me you're going to have intellect. But that intellect is not just legal sense, it has to be common sense. I think Scott has that. You need to be able to analyze facts and analyze them based on the law and not be blind to what the laws and the regulations are, but at the same time to understand that every case is different, every fact is different. And you need to meld the particular facts of the case with what the law is. Dedication to task. You can't take the easy way out. Scott never has. You need to be reasoned, but at the same time caring. It's a difficult balance. But you can't be blind to the people before you. Scott never would be. Professional and courteous. There are so many times you hear complaints from other members of the bar that perhaps our judges don't live up to our expectations. Perhaps they're not as caring and courteous, and not just to the litigants, but also to other lawyers and to other people in the court officers and people in probation. Scott is professional and courteous to all, to a fault. I also know that people have said to me, Jim, it's a strange phenomenon. Someone gets a black robe and they're no longer the same person they used to be. Scott and I have reflected on that during the 20 years we were together. I can guarantee you that won't happen with Scott Peterson. He knows where he came from. He knows his roots. And as my pal Fred said, they're rooted in two of the most wonderful parents you'd ever want to meet. Scott is passionate about the judicial system. He's wanted to be a judge. This isn't a lark. He really loves this opportunity. He understands the importance of the judiciary in our citizen government, and he understands the role of the three branches. Scott will follow the law, he'll listen to all parties, and ultimately, I am confident he will be guided by what he believes is fair, appropriate, and consistent with precedents and prior holdings. But Scott is the type of individual that will not stop there. He will not be afraid to challenge the status quo if he believes that what needs to be done. I can honestly tell you that I can't think of anyone I know in my 32 years of practice who is better equipped to be a district court judge or who would be a better public servant for the Commonwealth citizens. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I love Scott Peterson. I recommend him without any qualification. I respectfully ask for your support for his nomination.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll hear from Jocelyn Seton. You have a question?
How much experience does he have in criminal law other than to your knowledge of the present day? How long ago was he?
He left us in 2007.
All right.
So in the last 10 years, I haven't had that much experience, but I do know that in the last 3 or 4 years of his work with Healy and Healy, he actually started doing work with the Plymouth County District Attorney's Office. I believe it was as a special district attorney, is the term, maybe a better term. So, and what that tells me, Counselor, is that he understood that to be a great judge, you needed to have balance. And since our practice was focused mainly on the civil, even though he did a little criminal, he knew he had to go out and actually work to do that other part of the judicial system. And he did it.
Thank you. Next we'll hear from Jocelyn Sedney.
Good afternoon, members of the council. It's a pleasure to be here today to speak in favor of Scott Peterson. My name is Jocelyn Sedney. I'm a resident of Quincy. I am a partner in the firm of Brody, Perkins & Keston. I've been practicing civil litigation since 1985. I've had the pleasure of working with Scott in 2 specific cases over the last 8 years. And it's been a pleasure to work with him in these 2 very different contexts. In one case, he represented a very sympathetic plaintiff, and in the other case, a co-defendant in a complex construction case. I mention this because I believe it's very difficult for attorneys to strongly advocate for both plaintiffs and defendants in the civil context. Some defense attorneys simply can't do it. They're just too cynical. Some plaintiffs' attorneys can't do it because they're simply what I call true believers. And Scott is neither. I believe that if you can fill both of those roles and fill those roles well, you can better appreciate the pros and cons of the cases, you can better advise your clients, and you can better evaluate the case for resolution as well. Scott was clearly able to function very well in both of these arenas, and this would inure to the benefit of any litigant before him should his nomination be confirmed. In this plaintiff's case that we dealt with, Scott represented an elderly woman with significant property and personal injury damages, but the case had serious coverage issues, which impacted the defense of the case. He was compassionate, he was able to explain to his clients the legal difficulties, and they appeared to be devoted to him. He dealt with all counsel, judges, and the mediator in the case respectfully, in a friendly manner, and yet strongly advocated for his client. I believe that his manner in dealing with everyone in the case ultimately inured to the benefit of his client. In the defense case, Scott represented a co-defendant in a complex construction case with multiple parties, multiple attorneys who traveled throughout the country for depositions, with expert depositions, very difficult and involved expert issues. Again, Scott was courteous, good-humored with all counsel, got along with everybody, even though there were some rather difficult people, not myself included, but he got along so well with everybody. We spent a lot of time together in many places across the country. I observed him both professionally and socially throughout that time. He was always well-mannered and credit for our profession at all times. I highly recommend the nomination of Scott Peterson as district court judge be approved. I believe he will empathize with both plaintiffs and defendants, and yet also be able to make difficult decisions. I believe that litigants will indeed have their day in court, when hearing in front of him, and he will be a great addition to the bench.
Thank you very much. Councilor Kennedy.
Lenny Kessler,
Yes.
you know my soul.
Thank you. Next we'll hear from Bradford Carver.
Thank you. My name is Brad Carver. I'm a partner with the firm of Pinchot and Culbertson here in Boston. I've been practicing for approximately 35 years, mainly in the areas of construction and commercial litigation. And I want to thank you for providing me the opportunity to speak today. I'm honored to support Mr. Peterson. He asked me to speak on his behalf, and I wholeheartedly recommend Scott. My take is a little differently. The cases that I've had with Scott, we've always been adverse, usually as co-defendants, so he's been an adversary. But I've known him for a number of years, and as I said, we worked together in a number of lawsuits. The ones we worked together were very large construction matters, including one that's currently pending in Essex County. The most significant interaction we had, and which I think is important, is one of the matters we had included tens of depositions, thousands of pages of documents, and ultimately a jury trial that lasted approximately 30 days.
in Norfolk County, which was an endurance test for all of us. Both Scott and I represented defendants. Again, we were adverse to one another. But in addition to me, there were several other defendants, so it was a pretty crowded courtroom. But there are three things that I remember about the trial that stood out for me concerning Scott's abilities, his demeanor, his temperament, and what I would think would make him to be an excellent judge. First, we had a very difficult plaintiff's lawyer from Connecticut. I'm probably exaggerating, but I think we had sidebars at least once an hour. There were a lot of procedural, a lot of evidentiary issues we had to sort out. With all the parties, the sidebars were crowded, they were contentious. Scott always did a great job of concisely summarizing what the issue was, proposing reasonable and I thought pragmatic solutions that complied with the evidentiary procedure. And I know the judge really appreciated Scott's level-headedness and reasoned approach, and it actually did help the trial enormously. The second thing I observed about Scott was his interaction with the jury, which I think is certainly important for anybody wanting to be a judge. Construction cases can be a bit dry, can be a bit long, but Scott was always professional and courteous with the jury. He was able to explain to the jury simple terms on some pretty dry and complicated construction matters. And I'm certain his rapport with the jury and straightforward arguments had a lot to do with the great result he obtained in front of the jury in that case. Third and finally, I just want to comment on Scott's interaction with counsel. As I said, we had a very difficult plaintiff's lawyer. I described him as a classic table pounder. During the many depositions that were taken, oral arguments on multiple motions, many written communications, and certainly during the trial, I never saw Scott get angry. I never saw him lose his cool or act disrespectfully towards any of the counsel. And I can assure you that tempers became flared at many points during that long trial. And I think at a time when we're placing a huge amount of emphasis, as we should be, on professionalism, showing respect, having the right demeanor for fellow counsel, I can say Scott's at the top of the list. We also, as I said, have a current matter pending with Scott. Again, we're adversaries on that matter. There's some pretty touchy legal and political issues. It's pending up in Essex County. Again, Scott has dealt with those political and legal issues very respectfully and professionally. I really do appreciate the opportunity to speak on Scott's behalf. I fully support his Scott to be a judge, and if anybody has any questions, please answer them.
Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you for that testimony. It means a lot. I gotta ask you a personal question. In relation to the Bradford Tire case, get off the Mayflower on the 1620? Yes.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just have a question. How many cases did you pass in opposition?
We've had two.
Thank you.
I just have one question. Does he have any criminal experience? No.
I've never handled a criminal matter with Scott. I do mainly civil work, so I don't.
Thank you. Next we'll hear from John Mullen.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Mullen. I was a court officer for Commonwealth 33 years. Retired last July. Appreciate you letting me come in and say a few words about Scott. I met Scott probably about 16 years ago now, when I first got down to in the district court. And I met Scott through him coming in and being a special prosecutor for the district attorney's office. After I was assigned to the jury session for a few years, and every time that a special case came in, Mr. Peterson, Scott came in and he was the prosecutor. And after that, Scott and I became friends, socially and through other experiences in court. Scott, as the president of the Local Bar Association, became involved in what we call Law Day down there, May 1st every year. It's one of the highlights of the courts. Scott became very involved. I know he's in line as a past president to get the used to speaking in public, as you can tell. My role is very limited in the court, and my experience with Scott is he always came prepared in 90% of the criminal cases that I was involved in. He was a special prosecutor. Never seen him mad at anybody, never had seen Scott have a bad word for anybody. And I think he made a great judge. Is any questions?
Thank you, Councilman Juvil.
Nice to see you. Congratulations on your retirement.
Thank you.
I see you speak in public courtroom. People listen to you. Tell us about your observations of your criminal work. You seem to be able to handle
Scott was well prepared in every case that he had handled. And his interaction with the other staff and everything else was fine and great.
that. You had compassion for people when he was prosecuted.
Every single time I saw him in court, he never had, he handled himself accordingly and never had a bad word to say about anybody.
Thank you very much. That would exhaust the people speaking on behalf of the nominee. Is there anyone here who would like to speak in opposition? No? Okay, sure. Please stand right over here, please, sir.
My name is Patrick McCabe. I'm co-chair of the Politics Coalition. We're here speaking for this nominee. We're very interested in all the nominees in the district court. We have one issue, and that's the issuance of restraining orders. We feel it's a very big problem, and the problem that we see is when the proper legal standard is not followed. We spoke to the nominee about the legal standard and whether he would abide by it, and not just basically hand out restraining orders. He said, of course, if he would. We even asked him the tougher question: what do you do when you're up there on the bench and someone in there wants a restraining order? Because I've seen this happen a lot, where one party starts crying and screaming, asking for the restraining order. I think it's pretty difficult for a lot of people to say no to those people. He said he would have no problem. I take him at his word, so I believe he'll be a fine judge.
Thank you very much, Councilman Ann.
I just want to people here don't know, Patrick has come up his own time and I'm sure he's talking to the Father Coalition and he's made a difference because judges are saying that this issue has rights and I'm a member of Women in Leadership for Shared Parenting, so I do share their philosophy. And I think the 209A has been something that is concerning because how do you know if someone who has filed a 209A is legitimate or they're just doing it despite or whatever? So it is important to have to ask those questions.
I just want to clarify one thing. Whether it's legitimate or not, it's not the judge. We're talking about where there's absolutely no basis on what the person has said. And we see that a lot, and hear it a lot. And all we're just trying to raise it up to, I think, a very bare minimum. And then is they have to make an allegation in order to issue the restraining.
I think you told me of a time when this man had consent and he waived. Remember that?
Those are violations. It's a different aspect. Again, as I was talking to the nominee, one of the things we hear a lot about are the hockey game violations. Two people go into a hockey game thinking that the hockey game is big enough. And if you're on one end and the person's the other end, you're not going to get a violation. Hockey games are bad case, but that's happened. We've heard a lot of those cases being prosecuted. So, they're difficult things.
And can someone who waived to someone that was a violation. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much. Good to see you, Mr. McKay. That will exhaust the people in support of and the people in opposition. At this point, Mr. Peterson, before we can actually hear from you, if you have any family or friends you'd like to introduce,
Great. I'll start over on my right. The gentleman in blue blazer is my dad, Richard Peterson. Next to him is my mom, Janice Peterson. To her right is my son, Graham Peterson. And to his right is my wife, Allison Peterson. My sister, Kathy Buffington, and her husband, right there. My sister, Karen, is over in the corner. Karen and Kathy are twin sisters. You met Fred Gilgun, you met Jim Healy, you met Sharon Casey. Behind me is Judge Patrick Curley, the former justice of the Kingdom District Court. His wife, Cynthia. You met Jocelyn. And last but not least is John. He's a friend of mine, Roy, in South Shore. And I'll talk about some of these folks that I.
Thank you very much. Now we'll hear from you.
Right, so I did one quick confession. I did a dry run last night as far as my comments, and I timed it. It was 17 minutes long. So
That could be a record. I'm not sure you want to break that before you
Back to 16 minutes?
I'll give you a shot.
So I've cut it down to about 3. First and foremost, I'd like to thank my
We're doing well so far.
yes. First and foremost, I'd like to thank my host, Councilor Ainella, and the entire Governor's Council. I certainly appreciate the role that the Governor's Council plays in judicial nominees. Perhaps I didn't have a full appreciation until I got that letter on March 29th, but certainly as I've approached this hearing date, I know, as Councilor Jubenville likes to say, it's really the Governor who kind of recommends people to be judges, and at the end of the day, it's this body here that makes the final decision as to whether or not they're ultimately hired. I want to thank, of course, Governor Baker and Lieutenant Governor Polito for having faith in me and nominating me on March 29th. I feel truly humbled and honored by this opportunity. The day I was nominated was right up in line with 2 other very important dates in my life, my adult life. November 21st, 1992 was when at a church in Bedford I said I do to my wife. And then on September 3rd of 1998, I was in a waiting room at the Beth Israel Deaconess Hospital. My wife was having a C-section, and the nurse came out and said, "Your wife's fine, you have a healthy baby boy." So I put that date, March 29th, right up with those 2 dates. I want to, of course, thank Chief Legal Counsel Von Povich and the Executive Director of the JNC, Sharon Casey, and her staff, Olga Schumann and the doctor, for guiding me through this process. I want to, of course, thank the Judicial Nominating Commission for recommending me for appointment. And finally, I want to thank the witnesses who come in to testify on my behalf. A minute. All right. I'll go quicker. Next, I want to take an opportunity to introduce some family members and friends who are here. As I indicated, my wife Allison is here. We met at Suffolk Law School back in 1983 and 6. We didn't date in law school. We met a few years after through my secretary. We got married in 1992. Allison keeps me grounded. My son Graham took the afternoon off from Boston College High School. He's graduating from BCI in May. He's going to go off to the University of Wisconsin in Madison this fall. He's been a huge source of pride to both my wife and I. My parents, Rich and Janice Peterson, here. There's 2 things I'd like to share with you about my folks. First thing is, my dad didn't have the opportunity to go to college. My mom could only go for 1 year. But one thing they did was they made sure that their children had the chance to go to college, and in my case, law school. Second thing is they both have an unbelievable work ethic, and I think it's rubbed off on me. My dad's going to be 80. He's a cancer survivor ×2. He still works. And my mom is going to be 77. She's also a cancer survivor. She still works 3 days in a doctor's office. Up until May 12th of 1969, I was an only child. I was 8 years old. My mother went to Memorial Hospital in Worcester. She was pregnant. She had an ultrasound. Didn't really show much. Back then, the technology wasn't like it is today. But she came home a couple of days later and I had identical twin sisters. My sister Kathy and her husband Scott lived in Hingham with their 4 kids. And my sister Karen and her husband Dennis Fleming lived down in Lincoln, Rhode Island. My friend Judge Patrick Curley is here today. For those of you that don't know, Judge Curley served first the Rentham District Court and the Hingham District Court with distinction for almost 30 years. If I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed as a judge, I would emulate with Judge Curley. And last, I'd like to recognize my friend John Lynn. Next, I want to spend a few minutes talking about stuff that you won't find in the papers before you. That would be my application questionnaire. I was born in Worcester, grew up in Holden. Both my parents had full-time jobs at that point in time. In order to make ends meet, my dad started a construction floor contracting business, which he still does today. I went to public schools in Holden until I was the 8th grade. Then I went to St. John's High School in Shrewsbury. I went to Boston College from 1979 to 1983, the Flutie era. I always had jobs throughout high school, college, and law school to help pay for my education. One year I had a job at Norton Company where my dad worked in the factory. I did the 11 to 7 shift, which I hated but needed to do. And to make matters worse, that summer I got laid off right in the middle of the summer. So I kind of had first-hand experience as to what it's like to lose a job when it's through no fault of your own. After graduating from BC, I went to Suffolk Law School. I was a research assistant to Professor Russell Murphy. And he recommended me to Jim Healy's Healy. I worked there for 20 years. I've already, parts I've cut out of my presentation, it's all going to be in my applications. I know you have my application, the Governance Council questionnaire. I trust you can see that I have a considerable amount of civil experience over the last 30 years, as well as criminal experience since Councilor Hurley brought it up during some questioning. I recognized after I first applied to be a judge that I didn't have as much criminal experience as I needed to do. I knew I needed to do something about it, so I did. I went to the CPCS trial boot camp at MCLD back in 2003. It's a one-week program that you have to do before you get certified as a bar advocate. I had intended to be a bar advocate through the Program Advocates, which is run by the Plymouth County Bar Association. But then I was given the opportunity to work as a special assistant district attorney at the Hingham District Court, not too far from my office, by the DA's office down there, so I took advantage of that. So over the course of the next 3 or 4 years, I went into the court, picked up criminal cases that I thought had a good chance of trying. Obviously, most don't. And over the course of those 3 years, I tried criminal cases, mostly OUIs, some AMDs, with some very good judges down there, and some very accomplished criminal defense attorneys. I also trust you can see that I've been committed to the legal profession, not only in my practice, but through my leadership with the bar associations, my commitment to public service and community service, and the pro bono work I've done. In closing, I don't view being a judge as another job. I have a job now, and I certainly don't view being a judge as semi-retirement. I view it as a privilege. And if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed by this body, I will give the job 100% of my effort. I will come to the bench prepared every day. I will treat everyone who appears before me and works in the court with dignity and respect of our judicial officers. I will be fair and impartial, and I will always respect and follow the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, we'll hear from Councilor Joseph Ferrera.
Thank you. I had the privilege to hear from a dear friend of mine, co-police chief with me back in the day, a few years ago, Tab Mills, who just spoke the world of you and all kinds of things. I also see you have Sarah Worley in the mix here, who was here last week on behalf of another candidate. So I'm ready for your thing that you have the civil litigation experience, extensive civil litigation experience, not only construction but medical malpractice cases, plaintiff defense, you seem to have done it all. So I don't have any further questions for you. I don't have any questions for you. I just wanted to comment on everything.
I appreciate that.
Councilor Terry Kennedy.
Afternoon. We spoke on the phone, had a nice conversation. Since then, I've received a few phone calls about people about you. Had great things to say about you. Very, very close friend. I certainly take his opinion weighs very heavily with me because of your nomination. All of your criminal experience has been as a prosecutor, is that correct?
No. So since I started my own practice in February of 2013, I've been doing a little bit of criminal work.
Okay.
I tried a case in the Reading District Court last year at A&B on an elderly person, which is a felony.
Jury or judge?
It was a bench trial.
Huh?
Bench trial.
Bench trial? Okay. Who was that from?
It was Judge Stephen Thomas.
Okay, my classmate. How many jury trials have you done?
So I've done probably, that I can document through all my records going back.
Give me that. I'm talking criminal.
Criminal, so I probably did half the ones I did at the Hingham District Court with jury trials, the other half of bench, and the most recent defense case was a bench trial.
And have you done any defense jury trials?
Defense jury, no, I have not. Just as a special idea.
Okay, right. In terms of your civil work, how many jury trials would you say you've done?
So about 25.
Uh,
So that goes way back. My first jury trial was in 1989 up at Suffolk Superior Court.
Okay.
My partner, Tom Healy, took me up there. I expected he was going to stay during the course of the trial. He introduced me to the judge, Judge Donovan.
Judge Donovan?
It was against Sugarman and Sugarman. They were the plaintiff's attorney. This guy, Mark Breakstone.
You lost that one.
I haven't got there yet. So I'm expecting Tom to kind of sit there with me because it's my first trial. Tom was one of those guys who passed away this
Joy in the water.
Before the jury was even seated, he got up, said, "Scott, good luck," and he walked out and gave me the old good luck to you. So, again, in response to your question, I did win the trial, but I wasn't the best lawyer that day. I had the best evidence, I had the best witnesses. And I still see Mark Breakstone, if you know him. He's a pretty accomplished lawyer, and he still jokes about how I beat him back in 1980.
Well, I've tried a few cases in front of Judge Hurley as well over the years, and on occasion. I think that what you said about emulating him was very, very wise. He's a very, very good judge. I recall one case in particular, we did a lobby conference that was a very, very sensitive case where my client had what was started as a very minor accident led to devastating injuries for someone. I'll never forget the way he handled that in the course of that. Both in terms of disposition and in terms of appeasing victims in that case, giving them an opportunity to really be heard when they needed that. And I hope that's the type of thing that we can go the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Counselor Jen Casey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I saw that you are a member of the Hingham Rotary Club since 2000, including your service on its board of directors.
Yes.
So, do they have a range?
Like, are you talking like a driving range?
No.
What? Oh, no, they don't.
Okay.
They don't.
Okay.
They don't have many members yet left either.
Is that because you were on the board of directors?
No, it's not.
Where are you on the Second Amendment?
It's alive and well in Massachusetts per the Holding Keller. I did have a client who came in who was denied an application to carry by the chief of Plymouth. It went before a judge. He brought the decision in from the judge. I met with him. That was kind of my first foray into that area of the law. I sat down with the guy. I read the judge's decision. I thought it was spot on. He wanted me to appeal it to the Superior Court, which he did. And I told him he had like a 1% chance of prevailing. I thought the reasoning that the judge had and the police chief had were appropriate. He moved to New Hampshire. What I did see, though, when I met with him, was that he had a potential employment discrimination case. He got fired because he lost his right to carry. The place where he worked, I can't disclose because of a confidentiality, but that happened to other employees there. They had made reasonable accommodations for those employees, transferred them to other places where they didn't need to have a firearm. But for some reason, they didn't do that with my client. It was because he kept on going over and volunteering to go over to Afghanistan. He was in the Guards. And I think the employer got sick of holding his job open when he was over serving our country. And so I explained that I thought he had a valid discrimination case. He allowed me to take that case, and I ended up settling for him for $50,000. So, but that was kind of my first foray into the question that you asked. And I know how the framework works as far as what the judge can do when the police chief denies the application.
What type of hearing would Judge Peterson conduct with respect to appeal of the chief's denial of witnesses, evidentiary, pleadings? What would be your?
So I believe the judge's review in that situation is not, although they have to confine themselves to what the judge, what the police chief did. And if it was a disqualified person, a prohibited person who couldn't have a firearm, obviously those are really tough. But if there was no reasonable grounds to deny the permit, then that's where the judge would have some leeway to change. And obviously, the stand is whether the decision by the police chief was arbitrary or capricious or against the way of the evidence.
And I would say on that point, it's a good point, there are some disqualifying factors, and those are pretty police believes is a local flavor for this individual, would you be inclined to give a hearing, an evidentiary hearing, and take some testimony? It wasn't clear on the record.
I was under the impression though you were confined to the paperwork, but if the statutory scheme 140 allows that, and I thought there was something amiss with the reasoning of the police chief, I would do that.
Because there is no, I participated or attended, I should say, a pretty interesting seminar held by retired General Greenberg and some experts on this stuff. And one of the things that struck me was that in small towns, as you can imagine, you could have a spouse who is going through a divorce, and let's say that his or her father or mother is the chief of police, and so there's a denial on a suitability standard with no prior disqualifying factor, and it would never even be brought out that there was a bias necessarily. That would not be something the chief of police would have to disclose. There's no requirement of that statute. And a lot of times in these small towns, it is that, Hatfield employees thing, or it can be anyway. I've certainly seen that happen. So, I think that a hearing, particularly in suitability, was I've had nominees that they would have a hearing.
So my answer is if the statutory scheme allowed for me to take that evidence, I certainly would, and I think that's the only way you're going to figure out if there's some underlying bias as far as why the license to carry was denied by the chief.
And you highlighted a good example of how important it can be for people, it could be their livelihood in some cases. So I'm going to just use that and pivot to restraining orders because, sometimes people get LPCs, lose their LPC. Weapons because of restraining order. Have you had any experience with restraining orders, either advocating for the issuance or advocating for?
All right, so my experience is I have not represented either party on either side. When I applied last time, I did go to a seminar that Judge Dawley conducted, and I believe Judge Hinkle was there as well. It talked about the whole mechanics of 209A and how you deal with them. It was very informative. And of course, anybody that goes to district court fairly frequently always has the chance to observe how judges handle 209A hearings. So I've certainly done that, and I know what a judge needs to do. They have to weigh, on the one hand, the plaintiff's right to feel safe in her home versus, on the other hand, the implications that happen when you grant the ex parte restraining order. I mean, it could be implications, again, as license to carry is automatically taken away. It could have implications on the defendant's livelihood, perhaps coaching, things like that. And of course, always the stigma. And you know that once you make that order and it's allowed, it's really hard. Even if they come back for the 10-day hearing and you decide, you know what, it's not there, I'm not going to extend it, that's still going to be on the defendant's record. So you have